2020, a year dominated by the Wuhan virus.
It started in China. It's killing more people every day.
A year that saw an unprecedented US presidential election. 2020 also witnessed the signing of many international deals that could possibly change the world order in the coming years. But largely, this year will be remembered for the pandemic that sent the world into lockdown. As the year draws to a close, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is much excitement around the world for a COVID-19 vaccine, but the vaccine may not be accessible in many parts of the world, including countries in Africa. It's not the only challenge the continent is facing. Africa is witnessing upheavals across many regions.
Today, I stand here in front of you talking about peace because of faith. I crawled my way to peace through the dusty trenches of war years ago. I was a young soldier when war broke out between Ethiopia and Eritrea. I witnessed firsthand the ugliness of war in frontline battles. There are those who have never seen war but glorify and romanticize it. I call upon the international community to join me and my fellow Ethiopians in our Maddamar-inspired efforts of building enduring peace and prosperity in the Horn of Africa.
A year later, it looks like Nobel Peace Prize 2019 winner and the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed Ali, is breaking the promise of peace. Fleeing bullets and bombs, 65-year-old Ethiopian farmer Berhan Hali managed to escape to Sudan. But this is not the first time he has come here. 35 years ago, he left Ethiopia to escape the famine of 1985. But this time he was forced to flee to save his family and himself from the conflict in Tigray.
The reason I escaped is because of the war. But the main thing is that when I decided to come here, they were shooting heavy fire all over the village. That's why I decided to escape. Because of Abiy Ahmed, we weren't allowed to live in peace in our own village, because he sent his troops all over where I lived in the village.
Berhan and his family spent days walking to the border crossing with Sudan, among more than 45,000 who have fled from the fighting between the Ethiopian government and rebellious Tigray forces.
There's about 44,000 refugees that have arrived in the last few weeks. And although the pace has slowed down, there's still several hundred per day that are crossing the border.
The threat of an armed conflict between the federal government and the authorities in Tigray has been brewing for some time, but on November 4th, simmering political tension turned into armed conflict in northern Ethiopia. Ethiopia has a vast and multi-ethnic population. It is Africa's second most populous nation with 105 million citizens. The Tigray people make up roughly 6% of the population, while the Oromoros have a 34% share and the Amharas 27%. After Abiy Ahmed became the prime minister in 2018, Ethiopia's federal government and the Tigray regional forces started regarding each other as illegal. The country's first Oromo leader merged the ethnic and region-based parties of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, which had governed Ethiopia for 30 years, into a new party. While Abiy stated that he wanted to distance the country's politics from ethnic federalism, the move was seen as an opportunity to remove Tigray leaders from power completely. Tensions were building up for a while, citing the coronavirus pandemic. Abiy postponed this year's general elections that were scheduled for August 26th, a move that Tigray opposed. TPLF went ahead and held their regional elections nevertheless in September 2020. The Prime Minister refused to recognize the results and threatened to pull federal funding. The situation escalated to violence on the 4th of November, with an alleged attack by the Tigray People's Liberation Front on the Northern Command headquarters of the Ethiopian National Defense Force. 3 weeks later, the federal forces captured the Tigrayan capital of Mekelle on November 28th, following which Prime Minister Abiy declared the Tigray operation was over.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is wrong action transmitted to the people.
He cannot seize Mekelle. The Tigrayans are much stronger than Abiy Ahmed.
The Nobel laureate is leaving no stone unturned to reassure the media and his fellow countrymen.
Mekelle is ours. It was built with our resources. We are not going to destroy it. Not even a single person was harmed by the operation in Mekelle.
However, the committee that awarded the Nobel Peace Prize to the Ethiopian Prime Minister said that it was deeply concerned about the conflict and called on all parties to end violence. This is not the first time a Nobel Peace Prize recipient has come under scrutiny. Aung San Suu Kyi, who leads the Myanmar government and won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991 for campaigning for democracy, has been criticized for failing to stop the persecution of the Rohingya Muslim minority. Abiy took the award in 2019 for making peace with Eritrea after a devastating 1998-2000 war, and then lengthy standoff on the border. Within months, he released political prisoners, opened up the media, and made peace with Eritrea. But now he has unleashed Ethiopia's army on the rebellious northern region of Tigray, putting supporters in a fix. Ethiopia risks falling into an ethnic civil war with regional implications. The Horn of Africa is one of the most underdeveloped regions on Earth, comprising of 4 countries: Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Djibouti. It is also one of the most conflict-ridden. If the conflict between the Ethiopian government and Tigray authorities escalates, it will spill over to neighboring countries. On November 21st, Sudan boycotted the latest round of negotiations with Egypt and Ethiopia over the controversial Ethiopian dam on the Nile River. Ethiopia views the project as essential for its electrification and development. Egypt, which depends on the Nile for about 97% of its irrigation and drinking water, sees the dam as an existential threat. Sudan fears that millions of lives would be at great risk if Ethiopia unilaterally fills the dam. The three African nations have once again failed to agree on a new negotiating approach to resolve their years-long dispute over the controversial dam.
There were 6 of us in the bush yesterday. We headed back into the village and split ourselves into 2. 3 of us followed the raised part of the path, while 2 others and myself followed the lower path. We were shocked as we reached them. We found their corpses, and that was where the main killings took place. So we changed our route and went through a nearby village called Gudo. We met so many people fleeing from our village without knowing where they were going to. Some were even unconscious. Some huge quantity of harvested rice was set on fire. We really need prayers, and it's only God that can save us.
On November 29th, villagers in northeast Nigeria's Borno State buried their friends and families. 43 farmers were killed in an attack by suspected Islamist militants, while security forces searched for dozens of people who are still missing, including 10 women. Roughly 30 of the men killed were also beheaded in the attack.
Boko Haram has killed many of us. 32 people have been slaughtered. We need assistance. We need some weapons and armed men because we have youth who can volunteer to guard our farmers while working on the farm. Please do this for God's sake.
Boko Haram, Nigeria's militant Islamist group which has caused havoc in Africa's most populous country through a wave of bombings, assassinations and abductions, is back in news. They are fighting to overthrow the government and create an Islamic state. Boko Haram promotes a version of Islam which makes it haram or forbidden for Muslims to take part in any political or social activity associated with Western society. They forbid citizens from voting in elections, wearing shirts and trousers, or receiving a secular education. 110 are feared dead in the recent attacks. While no group claimed responsibility, such massacres have been carried out in the past by Boko Haram. President Muhammadu Buhari condemned the killings and called the attacks insane. Farmers have been previously attacked by the jihadist group, who suspect them of passing on information to the military. In October, Boko Haram militants killed 22 farmers working on irrigation fields in 2 separate incidents. The Nigerian government has repeatedly claimed that the terrorist group has been defeated, but despite regional efforts to end Boko Haram's campaign of violence, the group has stepped up its attacks in recent months. Nigeria has hit rock bottom as food prices in the country have risen dramatically over the past year, driven by flooding, border closures, and insecurity in some food-producing areas. Libya has been in a long-running conflict for around a decade now. The North African country is split between a UN-supported government in the capital Tripoli in the west and rival authorities based in the east. The 2 sides are backed by an array of local militias as well as regional and foreign powers. The country was plunged into chaos after the 2011 NATO-backed uprising. It toppled and killed longtime dictator Muammar Gaddafi. Then, in April 2019, East-based commander Khalifa Haftar and his forces launched an offensive to try and capture Tripoli. The campaign stalled after months of fighting and eventually collapsed in June 2020. Haftar's forces have since withdrawn to the coastal city of Sirte, which is a gateway to major oil ports. After a year-long but abortive attempt by Haftar to seize Tripoli, the 2 sides signed a formal truce deal in October this year. things seem to be getting somewhat better. Fighting has died down over the past months because of the international pressure on both sides. In fact, rivals from war-torn Libya recently started a new round of talks in Morocco as part of stepped-up efforts to bring an end to a decade of conflict. The aim is to remove foreign mercenaries from the oil-rich country by late January, pull forces back from forward positions, and open the road across front lines.
Libyans deserve, if not the support, then at least the non-interference of the main international actors as they seek to forge a sovereign political path forward for future Libyan generations. Thank you.
Libya's rivals may have signed a historic ceasefire, but the peace in the Islamic State comes at a high cost. Nearly 400,000 Libyans have been displaced over the past 9 years, and thousands have died. The conflict has cost tens of billions of dollars in lost oil revenue and damaged infrastructure. Also, it has sharply reduced living standards. Since the internationally recognized government of national accord drove Khalifa Haftar's Libyan National Army back from the capital Tripoli in June, the shooting has given way to political jostling. The UN-led diplomatic effort has set a roadmap to elections at the end of next year.
We need an executive power that will help unify the divided institutions in Libya, and that same power will try to alleviate the suffering of Libyan citizens who suffer from lack of liquidity, gas, electricity and gasoline.
Despite recent progress, a comprehensive end to the Libyan conflict remains out of reach in the coming months. But 5 years ago, Burkina Faso was seen as a terrific tourist destination for Europeans, one of the friendliest and safest countries in all of Africa. Today, the country seems to be visibly sinking. It's battered by a jihadist revolt that has swept in from neighboring Mali. According to a local monitoring group, the Observatory for Democracy and Human Rights, more than 1,650 civilians and soldiers have died since 2015, a figure that some say is probably just a fraction of the real tally. Nearly 1 million people have fled their homes. The terrorist menace that first grabbed global attention in Afghanistan in 2001 and was later reconfigured in Iraq and Syria has found a fresh center of operations. Burkina Faso lies in the heart of the Sahel, whose leaders have joined a French-backed effort to roll back jihadism in the vast semi-desert region. For several years, Burkina Faso seemed immune to jihadist attacks. According to some analysts, it was the result of a secret deal between the then president Blaise Compaoré and militant groups. After Compaoré was ousted in 2014, the armed forces were essentially muzzled. They were deprived of funding, equipment and training. The government of President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore took power in 2015. As the jihadist attacks mounted, the armed forces continued to face defeats. Some say Kabore has done little to quell the relentless jihadist attacks. According to the United Nations, Burkina Faso is one of the fastest growing displacement crises in Africa. More than 5 million children have been affected by school closures in the country due to coronavirus and violence. There is a scarcity of everything from water to gas to food. When these products are available, the prices are tripled or quadrupled.
First of all, it is necessary to eradicate the system of terrorism that kills all families, and then there is education and then self-sufficiency. They talk about it, but it has not happened yet.
In the midst of all this, Christian Kabore has won a second term as president of Burkina Faso, even as opposition figures decried the election as marred by bribery and irregularities.
We expect a lot from the new president because the challenges are enormous. But in particular, what we expect from him is that he be a unifier, first of all, and because the divisions are so big, that he may be able to weld back together and return the Burkinabe towards the core, and that he be a man of action and a vision to drive us towards a better tomorrow.
In victory remarks, Kabore attempted to present a unified Burkina Faso, but for peace to prevail in this fragile region, a change of strategy is needed now. On November 18th, the Democratic Republic of the Congo declared an end to its Ebola outbreak, nearly 6 months after cases were reported. The outbreak emerged in June in western DRC, just before Congo declared the end of a separate Ebola epidemic in the east. It was the second deadliest on record, killing more than 2,200 people. Congo has suffered 11 Ebola outbreaks since the virus was discovered near the Ebola River in 1976. Its equatorial forests are a natural reservoir for the virus, which causes severe vomiting and diarrhea and is spread through contact with body fluids.
Au moment où nous déclarons la fin de cette épidémie,
as we declare the end of this epidemic, the Democratic Republic of Congo continues to face the COVID-19 pandemic. In order to overcome this scourge, the Congolese population is invited to scrupulously respect the measures that have been put in place.
Scrupuleusement le geste barrière.
Apart from grappling with Ebola and coronavirus, Congo also had to face a series of attacks in 2020. Known as the 2020 Democratic Republic of the Congo attacks, the atrocities were mostly carried out by the Allied Democratic Forces, a radical Islamist rebel group, and the Cooperative for the Development of Congo, an agricultural and religious group made up of ethnic Lendu people. The attacks left at least 1,217 people dead and 102 injured. The ADF, which has been active in the region since the 1990s, is one of the many militias in the eastern provinces of the vast country. The militia massacred people in rural areas, seeking to dissuade civilians from collaborating with the military. The civil unrest has also cast a shadow on Ebola relief efforts. The country is stricken by extreme poverty, and the economic impact of COVID-19 on Congo and the rest of Africa has been catastrophic. The region is now going through its first ever economic recession, with not even a single country being spared. This year, Nigeria topped South Africa as the continent's biggest economy. Two countries account for almost half of sub-Saharan Africa's gross domestic product. On the medical front, the countries are dealing with COVID-19. With a population of 1.3 billion people, Africa has reported more than 2.1 million confirmed cases of coronavirus. But there is hope. It has had a lower death rate than other continents. Despite their reputation for having fragile state health systems, many African countries have been praised for waging an effective campaign to combat the spread of coronavirus. However, mass vaccination against COVID-19 is unlikely to start in Africa until midway through next year. Most of Africa lacks the infrastructure to preserve these vaccines, but the success of a COVID-19 vaccine will hinge on its delivery. However, some things are certain. The world cannot defeat COVID-19 without including Africa in the global response, and a successful response to this pandemic will require Pan-African solidarity.